And I think that's the beauty of our classic films that we love. And I feel like we're starting to come back into that again, that we don't have to make strong women bitches.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we are passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. And we'll give a few recommendations to you, our listeners. Beware, possible spoilers ahead. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast during the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. And as all good stories do, the world got even crazier. But, as Neil Gaiman says, fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. Since I believe that stories have the power to show us the way and give us courage to keep going, I wanted to see if that was true for my guests as well. You're listening to episode 22. Today, my guest is my sister Celeste Sage Tate again, and she and I talk a lot about classic movies, and we have several actresses that we like because they are very strong women. In The Holiday, Eli Wallach's character tells Kate Winslet's character that he wants her to watch films with women that have gumption. And that's what these actresses are. They play women that have gumption. So Celeste, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes, it's so fun. So today we're going to talk about Bette Davis, Ginger Rogers, Barbara Stanwyck, Irene Dunne, Katharine Hepburn, Rosalind Russell, and Greer Garson, not necessarily in that order. So we are going to start with Bette Davis because Celeste, you and I both love Bette Davis.
Love her.
And we're only going to talk about a couple of movies for each of the actresses. And the first one we're talking about is Now Voyager from 1942. And this is a movie that I show in my dramatic structure class. And I'm always surprised that my students really relate to this movie. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, I think the thing for me when I first saw Now Voyager, I was pretty young. I think I was in my 20s, which now October I'll be 55. So I've had a long love of Bette Davis since my 20s.
Yes.
And I know this is when I first fell in love with her. And I became pretty hungry for more of her movies. Mm-hmm. And what I love about this is the storyline is still relevant today. It didn't grow old. I enjoy it just as much now. And I think as I've matured, I see more in it. When I was young, I think what I saw in it was her niece, who when Bette Davis's character is dowdy and overweight and abused, so obvious from her mother and controlled and manipulated, that her niece is quite cruel to her.
Yes, she really
I remember thinking it when I was young was, well, she's just a spoiled brat. Well, now as I watch it, I really see it was what her niece was conditioned to do. It was a family thing. And even her mother was trying to get her to stop. But, obviously it's a time period thing.
Yeah. You mean the niece's mother?
The niece's mother, yes. Who is this entire time totally a champion for Bette Davis's character.
Right. Bette Davis's character's name is Charlotte.
Charlotte. For Charlotte, she's never had anyone be a champion for her until she's older.
Right.
And she really starts to see, as they visit the family home more, her sister-in-law, she sees how Charlotte is abused and controlled.
Yes. And that she's on the verge of what was called a nervous breakdown.
Right. And so she gets permission by the mother. Well, let's let this doctor just come visit and we'll see what happens. She and the doctor, I think, which is, of course, who we love.
Claude Rains. Yeah.
One of my favorite co-stars of hers. Mm-hmm. This is how he is that quiet observer and just knows exactly when to interject and to when to step back and watch.
He gains her trust really quickly.
Yes, he does. She sees through him when he's like, oh, what are these carvings of these boxes?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, it's just something that I do. And he's like, these are beautiful. It's a great deal of concentration and talent. And the look on her face when he looks at her is like, you can tell no one has ever spoken to her that way before.
Exactly.
And he knows that just from 5-10 minutes of observation with her mother.
Yeah.
Because of course, the agreement is supposed to be, let's not tell Charlotte who he is. And of course, the mother says it right away.
Yeah, she's terrible.
To try to control Charlotte.
Yeah, she's a really horrible person.
Oh,
my students are always like, oh my gosh, she's so terrible.
She is. Oh my gosh, she's just awful.
Gladys Cooper plays her so well.
She's really great at playing this absolutely horrible person or an absolutely deeply loving, compassionate person.
Yes.
She has a great range in her character acting as well. But what I think I love is not only that it's still relevant for today, but how Bette Davis has great range in the role.
Well, the thing that I love about it and that I always point out to the students is she learns life skills. She hasn't really had a whole lot of interaction with people outside her family.
Awkward.
And yes, and the doctor teaches her how to make friends, how to even love, at least start to like herself, which then turns into love for herself. Right. And when she meets Paul Henreid's character, Jerry is his character name. Right. And he, she knows that he's married right off, but he has a daughter who's in a similar situation to her, and they connect that way. And then they fall in love. Well, of course, it's an unconventional love relationship because they're never going to get married.
Well, and the thing that's so great about Charlotte and Jerry is she sees that there's someone else out there like her.
Yes. Yes. And then later when she meets his daughter, Tina, she can be the person in Tina's life that her sister-in-law, Lisa, was in her life.
Right.
She can help. And that's what actually is the cool part of it. It's like she gets healed and then she helps somebody else heal. Right.
It's one of my favorite sayings is her trauma, it teaches her how to teach. You teach what you need to learn.
Right. Yeah.
She still needs to learn how to love herself. Mm-hmm. And she learns it by working with Tina.
Yes, she does.
And that conversation that she has with Claude Rains' character, the doctor, when she convinces him, just let me do this. I know this isn't what you normally would want, but I can help her and help me at the same time. Mm-hmm. And you can see this is another great acting moment for Claude Rains.
Right.
It's like you can see the wheels turning of him doing the process of, will this do more harm or good? And he realizes it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, for both of them.
It's what he's there to do is to help people learn how to love themselves.
Yeah, and the woman who wrote the book, which I didn't write down her name, I'll put it in the show notes. She actually wrote this book because she had therapy herself from someone who was unconventional, like the Claude Rains character.
Oh, what a lovely, see? Her mess is the message.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Another thing I love about the movie is at the end, she and Jerry are not going to get married unless, of course, someday his wife dies. Right. Supposedly she's ill, although she's probably just a hypochondriac. So her having Tina live with her allows him to come visit every once in a while. Right. And his wife doesn't really want Tina around anyway. So, and they can just be together, not sexually or anything, but they're just, they're helping Tina together, which is so cool. It's this unconventional relationship.
Yeah. And it's, in some ways, I think it's a very modern idea for the year that the film came out.
Exactly.
Because, the assumption is always made that if a man and woman is having a friendship, they must be having sex.
Right. Yeah. And that's not the way it is in this.
And that's not the way it is at all. Even though they deeply love each other, she knows for once in her life what her purpose is.
Yes. And she blossoms. I love the way she blossoms.
And I love how her body language from the very beginning to the middle to the end, you see her progression change.
Yeah.
Especially when she meets the daughter.
Well, and it's interesting the way movies always give you visual clues because her costumes change. And one of the things I always point out is at the beginning, Charlotte's coming down the stairs and they have a shot of her feet.
Yep.
And she's wearing these industrial strength shoes.
Oh, yeah.
And then later, when she's coming down the gangplank, when she goes on the voyage where she meets Jerry, they show her feet again coming down the gangplank, and she's got these fashionable shoes on.
And amazing costume choices.
Right. And it's showing her evolution as a human being.
And then, the beautiful hats. Her hair is swept up. And the other thing that I think is so vitally important, too, is how she forgives her niece.
Well, and she forgives her mother, too. And that's the other thing.
Oh, yeah.
She gets home. Her mother's still trying to control her. And she finds this middle ground where she can balance being independent with honoring her mother.
Well, and how she says to herself, I'm not afraid of her anymore.
Yeah.
Which is huge for her.
Well, she says that to the mom. I'm not afraid anymore.
I'm not. And then she says it to herself and then she says it out loud. Mother, I'm not afraid of you anymore. And of course, that in the next step is when the mother throws herself down the staircase because she realizes I have to find a way to continue to control her and manipulate her, which it doesn't work.
No.
It doesn't work.
Well, and then that's when she tells Charlotte, you're going to be a very wealthy woman when I die if you follow what I want you to do. But then she says, well, I could get a job. I can work. I don't have to have your money. And that changes her mom's mind too.
Well, because, you just said it without really working too terribly hard, her mother changes. Rather than being so angry at Charlotte for growing and evolving, it's an acceptance. And the other thing that I like too is Mary Wick's character as the nurse.
I love her.
She's vital too. She's vital. How she, the queen has called and, how she protects Charlotte through the process as well.
She's a buffer. Yeah. I love it when Charlotte says to her, Dora, I suspect you are a treasure.
Yes, right. And Dora's like, almost like she says, well, yeah, someone finally figured that one out. Kind of thing,
She just smiles.
It's really amazing character driven.
Yes,
how
it is.
And even her siblings that don't have these huge parts are vital when they first see her, when she's come back from this trip and she comes downstairs with this beautiful gown and and they're all gobsmacked.
Yeah, they are.
They're like, is that you?
Especially when she starts the fire, which is never been.
Like, oh, there's never a fire in that fireplace. She's like, oh, well, there will be now. And they're just like,
she's defying
and
mother.
I think at the end of the night, they're like, we're really proud of you.
Yeah, I think so too.
They're happy for her and glad for her.
Yeah.
That she had this transformation, know, and then the part where, her niece hugs her in tears and is like, I'm so terribly sorry. And she's like, it's okay. Like Charlotte knew that behavior was somewhat rewarded.
Yeah.
Or she wouldn't have learned it and done it. Towards the end, as Charlotte when she's brought Tina to her home and the mother has died and she's creating this blueprint of this wonderful place that she's going to create for young people to come to grow and learn and be healed with the doctor, and they're roasting weenies and having fun. And because the doctor's like, oh, this place is a dreary place. And then he walks in, he's like, oh.
There's music playing and
everything's happy and joyous and my gosh, And the other thing that's important too is in the middle there, Charlotte gets engaged with a man that is expected of her. And I think that's why she wants to move forward from Jerry, but she just can't.
She loves him too much.
She loves him too much. And I think she also sees that the life that she knows is her purpose would not happen if she were to marry him.
Oh, right. Because she'd be expected to be a society wife.
She would have to be a society wife. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And and that's the thing that's so great is that she is okay with staying single. She doesn't need a man to complete her. And that's another monumental story for that time period. I'm not going to marry and have children. And she's okay with that.
Yeah. So let's contrast that with the letter, which is Betty Davis plays a completely opposite character. This one, the letter was made in 1940. So it's 2 years before Now Voyager. And Herbert Marshall plays her husband. And they live on a rubber plantation. Her husband's the administrator of it.
And what's the country again?
Ceylon.
But I know they're in a different country.
Ceylon or someplace like that.
Yes, that's right.
But the opening of that movie is so fantastic because Betty Davis has a gun in her hand. She's walking down the stairs and she's shooting this man.
Right.
That's how the movie opens.
That's exactly how it opens. And then, the investigation is starting to ensue and she plays the innocent.
Right.
He was trying to hurt me. The ultimate manipulation of I am the wounded one.
Right. I was the victim.
I'm the victim. He was the bad guy.
Right.
Because he must have been a bad guy because that's what men do to innocent women. He was a predator, which of course, as the story unfolds due to the incredible work of the attorney, he starts to see things and notice things because he's the great observer. Mm-hmm. To me, he's the observer of the story and really see, because I love my husband. I love him. Mm-hmm. He's my world. I wouldn't do anything and of course it's the manipulation to get her husband to be enraged that this man was trying to violate her.
Yeah.
So of course it must have been self-defense. Because she knows how much Herbert Marshall is in love with her. And she totally plays that up.
Yep, she does. Yeah.
And she has everybody hornswoggled.
Yeah, she does. Except for the lawyer who starts to see it.
Right. And then when he starts to get some communications, because he does his job so well, she didn't expect him to do his job like this. But the widow of the man that she killed helps in her secret little ways to make sure information's put out there. And
then she has a letter from Betty Davis to her husband, and she's blackmailing Betty Davis.
I mean, it's really, if you think about it, it's two strong female characters.
Right.
The widow of the man that she has killed.
And the widow is actually supposedly an Asian woman, although she's played by a white woman.
Sandergaard, yeah.
Yeah.
They just call her Mrs. Hammond through.
That's right, yes.
But she's not about to let Leslie get by with it.
Oh, no.
She wants everyone to know what a horrible person she is.
Well, and that's one of the things that's so interesting about the end of the movie is because of the studio system and the censorship and all that. Leslie had to pay for her crime.
She did, yeah.
And so she does.
Because I think someone said in the book she gets by with it.
Oh, see, I've never read that book.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Ben Mankiewicz was talking about the stories. This was a while ago, and he said, in reality, she was supposed to somewhat get by with it. but the studio system would not let that happen. So they're like, nope, you can't let someone get away with murder, which I kind of like that, because it really is kind of a, if you want to call it, come to Jesus moment for Bette Davis when she comes face to face with the widow.
Right.
Because in reality, what we need to talk about is Bette Davis and this man that she killed, they were having an affair. And he wanted to end the affair to marry this other woman.
And that's why Bette Davis killed him.
And that's why she killed him, because she sees it as a betrayal, because he was supposed to take her away from her husband, who she can't stand.
Right.
And he tries. You can see her slowly. At first, her whole pretense was working out great, but slowly but surely it's getting chipped away. You can't fake it as well, which is another great evolution of the character. This cold-hearted biatch.
Right.
But I'm pretending to be this innocent.
Yes. And, it's so
devoted to her husband.
One of the things that I think is so interesting, it's sort of a MacGuffin kind of thing, but she's always crocheting.
Yeah.
She does that all the way through the trial.
And I really think that's the image she is portraying.
Right.
Not that it really is. Well, even the lawyer says something about the intricacies of her crocheting and what it takes to do that.
Well, another thing that's interesting is at one point when she goes to pay the money to get the letter, she wears the shawl that she has been crocheting. She wears it over her head. And
another one of those smart costume choices, story choices of, is it going to protect her?
Exactly, yeah.
When really you can't be protected from your own
dark side, yeah. I
mean, what she does is unadulterated evil.
Yeah.
And like she says, when she finally breaks down, I don't love you. I still love the man that I killed.
Yes. And he's totally shocked.
And Herbert Marshall, who we could do a whole thing just on him and his fantastic acting.
I know.
Because his facial expressions, that in that moment of he thinks she's crying because she's so broken.
Yeah.
And then, he's loving her and has his hand on her head, and then when she says, I still love the man I killed, without any words, it's like in an instant he sees her for who she really is.
And how long have they been married and he's never known?
So those two movies are an amazing contrast with each other.
Yes. And she has a huge filmography of great movies.
Oh, I don't know if she ever truly plays the same person in any of her movies.
So we're recommending go check out Bette Davis if you haven't.
Anything you can watch with her, you will not be sorry.
Yes.
The lists are huge.
Yes, it's huge, huge. Okay, so we're going to move to Ginger Rogers next, and we're going to talk about Kitty Foyle. Yep. Kitty Foyle is a 1940 movie also, and Ginger Rogers plays with Dennis Morgan and James Craig. Yep. And I love this movie because she, again, an unconventional character. Yeah. It takes place in the beginning in Philadelphia, and Kitty Foyle comes from a hardworking, kind of middle-class family, and she becomes a white-collar worker, but she falls in love with Dennis Morgan's character, and he is of the upper-class Philadelphia elite. Yes. And James Craig is a doctor that she meets after things sort of look like they're going to fall apart with Dennis Morgan. And I think it starts when she's helping the doctor at a birth in the poor part of town. Right. And he asks her to marry him, and they're going to go leave and get married at midnight.
And she's at the apartment packing.
And Dennis Morgan has shown up again.
Morgan has shown up.
He's like this bad penny that keeps...
yes. That she actually thinks is shiny and pretty.
Yes.
But how it starts is perfect, what you just said. Yes, she's helping this doctor. And at the time, until he asks her to marry him, you don't realize they've already had somewhat of established relationship.
Right, exactly.
Then, of course, as she's packing, getting ready to go, she looks at the snow globe that Dennis Morgan's character, his name is Wyn, W-Y-N, given her. And so she starts to reflect on what has happened in her life.
Right.
To bring her to that current point. And actually what you see from that, and she, with her reflection, is, how she meets Dennis Morgan. She sees him as this go-getting guy that has left his family fortune to start his own magazine. And she has just finished secretarial school or something like that.
Yeah, I think she has.
So she can get out of the hard living that she was making. And so he asked her to be his secretary. And of course, romance ensues.
Well, and it's her father that introduces him. Yeah, her father is ill. And that's partly why she needs to go to work. She needs to take care of him. But the other thing is that she, even since she was a young teenager or almost teenager, she was so in love with all of the mainliners is what they're called.
Yes.
And Wyn is part of that. And so, yeah, so when she meets him, she's all dazzled.
Well, and he's got the big smile and he's larger than life.
Right.
And that's what attracts her to him because, like I said, she sees him as this real go-getter and this guy that's out to take over the world on his own terms. And that's what she thinks she wants. And I think he doesn't realize it. Wyn doesn't realize that it's a persona.
Oh, yeah.
He thinks he really is going to win over the world and make it on his own. And as their relationship continues, you think it's going to be successful. It looks like everything is going so well. And then what does he do? He leaves for a while.
Well, and they get married and
then they get married. He's like, I got to have you. I want you in my life. And he's never introduced her to his family.
Right.
And she even brings that up. Is there a reason why we go all over the place and you never introduce me to your family?
Yeah. And the thing that because I watched this again the other day and I realized that he knows he's got this certain kind of financial arrangement.
Well, it's in the will.
It's in the will and he doesn't have, the money's not free and clear. Right. It's a trust fund.
It's a trust.
And he can't do whatever he wants if he wants the money. And he knows this when he takes her to meet his family. Right. But he has fed her this line that we're going to live in New York and and
our own independent selves.
Yeah. And then she gets there, she meets the family and they're going to send her to finishing schools. Yes. So she can be a society. And she's like, wait a minute, what are you?
Well, and the thing is, when he doesn't even know it's the great lie that he's told her, he truly thinks it's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
And really what he doesn't understand is he lied to her. He manipulated her.
Yeah.
I think he was hoping because at that point his magazine failed. He had to send everybody home.
Well, it failed because he
believed in him. No, you can do this, you can do that. And he's like, we can do anything together, which really what you get from that moment when he has introduced her to the family. And then they tell her, don't you understand? We all live under this trust that was in the will.
Right.
And he can't leave or do anything outside of the family business or Philadelphia, or he will lose everything.
Well, he wasn't a very good manager or editor of the magazine.
Right.
He chose all these people that were like himself, who were just ne'er-do-wells. Like one woman comes in and she's supposed to turn in this article about a wedding. Oh, I never made it to the wedding. I did blah, blah, blah. And the look on Ginger Rodzer's.
I know. It's a great look. She's like, oh, you didn't do your job?
Yeah.
It's like you said the other day. They are all the epitome of white privilege.
Oh, yeah.
They don't realize they come from privilege trying to just go out and create something without really knowing what the hell they're doing. And what that also means in the white privilege, especially in that time period, that they were given no life skills.
Yeah.
They thought they could just start something and, oh, well, we're got charismatic personalities and we can do that. And they thought it was just going to be on a wing and a prayer and it was going to work.
Right. I mean, they've never had to figure out where their next meal was going to come from.
Right.
They've never had to figure out how they were going to work and so they could support themselves. They've never had to do any of that.
Never had to. That's why, she always had to. And I completely understand being attracted to the bling bling.
Yeah.
And him being attracted to her because she has what he wishes he had.
Yes, exactly.
Which is, in reality, not coming from nothing, but freedom of choice.
Right, exactly. Well, and then let's talk about James, how she meets the doctor James Craig plays. And I love that she gets this job at this perfume store.
Right.
The owner of the store is kind of watching her work this woman, and she's selling this really expensive perfume. I don't think she realizes how expensive it is when
she doesn't, because when she says, "Oh, it's only something an ounce,"
right? Yeah,
she's like, "Oh my god!"
And then she goes to box it up, and there aren't any boxes, and so she's supposed to flip a switch to get one sent up from the warehouse, and she accidentally flips the fire alarm.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. And then her coworker's like, Fate, do something. Because we don't want you to lose your job,
Yeah, because she's new to the job. And then James Craig is the doctor that they call in because they think she's fainted. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. That's a really fun meet cute.
Yeah, it is it's actually one of my favorite meet cutes.
Yeah.
But, the whole thing, which we really need to talk about, this is another one of those movies, and it's no wonder that Ginger Rogers won an Oscar for it because of her evolution, her growth that she comes to. I totally love it because, yes, she and Wynn get married, but then she realizes he is not going to leave his life. And then she realizes she's pregnant. And, she and her boss have become very good friends. And it's another strong female character who owns this company that is actually, eventually, as we see in the story, she sends her to New York because she's opening up another store. And she's promoted Ginger Rogers because she's so good at her job.
No, she's in New York. She sends her to Philadelphia.
Oh, that's an amazing story that this woman who doesn't appear to be super important, but yet she's such an important character for Kitty Foyle because she supports her.
Yeah, and I love that Kitty Foyle, when she finds out she's pregnant, decides she's going to have the baby.
Right.
And the boss is there for her.
Yeah. She's divorced the man who's the father of her child.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm going to have this baby. I'm going to raise this baby and he's going to be strong. And, he's going to learn great things in life. And her boss is like, okay, I'm there for you.
That's a great female relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Co-supporting relationship.
Right.
And then, of course, it fast forwards to her having the baby. And she's like, where's my baby? And, her boss has to tell her he didn't survive. And then, how she survives that. She still has the gumption to live her life.
To keep going.
To keep going.
Yeah. And threaded through that is the doctor.
Right. And he's threaded in there. He sees her for who she is.
Yeah. And he knows about Wynn and her relationship with him. Right. But he still loves her, and he doesn't.
Well, the thing that's so great about him is he doesn't expect her to be anything other than what she is.
Exactly.
Where Wynn was, I'm going to make you love me without him realizing because he's so white privileged. And you're just going to go ahead and want to live the life that I have to be ordered to live. Right. Because he's very surprised when she just walks out and goes, I'm not doing this. Yeah. And he's like, wait a minute. And she's like, nope, I'm sorry. I'm not doing that. You were not honest with me. And then I really like the relationships that when she goes on that first date, which technically it's not really a first date, that they don't go out, she and the doctor, they stay in and play cards and stuff. Yeah. He's testing her. Yeah. Her roommates are really great too. How these three women in that small apartment support each other.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that is cool.
It's really a female-driven story.
Yeah, it is.
When all is said and done, like you say, she chooses joy rather than struggle. Because when Wynn comes back to her, he's still married.
I know. And he wants her to go away with him and be his mistress. It's like,
right.
What planet are you living on?
He doesn't even know who I am.
That's right. At first, she's dazzled and, oh my gosh, he still wants.
He always knew how to dazzle her.
Yeah.
So that's a highly recommended movie.
Yeah. And then to contrast that, another female-driven movie, Tender Comrade with Ginger Rogers. This one comes out in the middle of the war, 1943.
43, yeah.
And it's 3 other women share a house with her and the expenses while their husbands are away fighting in World War II. Yeah. And I always, when I heard Ben Mankiewicz or whoever it was introducing the movie the first time I saw it, I was like, what? Because it was labeled a communist movie.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. If you didn't, I was going to.
And I was like, what? Because they are taking care of each other. And I think one of them has a child even. So they're taking care of the child and they're pooling their resources. They're all living in the same house.
And working various jobs to keep things going.
And they go down to one car so that they can be there.
And what it really is a reflection of not communism, but during the war, they had to ration so much.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, they weren't even given a choice to conserve. They had to.
Right. Yeah.
Because fuel had to go to the airplanes.
Right.
So they had to go down to the one car because if you tried to have everybody that lived there have their own cars, well, they couldn't afford that.
Well, and that's why a lot of people had victory gardens so that they could have vegetables.
And it is a story of the support that all these women give each other. They're all in the same boat, so to speak.
Yeah. And some of them, they get the bad news, that their husband has died. And then so they're there for each other.
They are. And it's a really unusual part for Robert Ryan, too.
I forgot. He plays the husband.
He plays her husband, Chris. Because, Robert Ryan was known for playing some pretty bad guys. I mean, he's scary. But I really like him in this part. He shows a really good range for himself and his tenderness that he has. Yeah, I think he and Ginger Rogers do a good job playing a couple in that.
It's been a long time since I've seen that one. I would like to see that one again.
Oh, it makes me cry.
Yeah. Well, and Ginger Rogers, another one that, there are so many great movies. And I'm not just talking about the ones where she's with Fred Astaire. So check out Ginger Rogers. She has lots and lots of really great movies.
Fantastic.
The next actress that I want to talk about is Rosalind Russell. And the one movie that I definitely want to talk about is Auntie Mame, because Mame Dennis, this is based on a memoir of a real guy and his aunt. And she is the most colorful character.
She is.
And she's so interesting. And again, somebody who carves out a life for herself. She never married. Oh, wait, take it back. She gets married in the course of the movie, but her husband dies. So, but she never gets married again. She's wealthy, so she can live like she wants. But the thing is that she's bohemian, but
bohemian, right?
She has this wide range of friends who are musicians and actors and artists and intellectuals. And it's so great how she just accepts people.
And how they portray her is worldly without portraying her to be cheap and a whore.
Right. This movie is from 1958. And there's a musical version with Lucille Ball too, but this is my favorite one because Rosalind Russell is so fantastic.
She's so phenomenal. She
is.
But she's another one. I mean, there's a million movies I could recommend with her in it.
Yeah. The basic story is that she wakes up one morning and her nephew has arrived.
Right.
His parents have been killed and she's his guardian now.
Right. And it changes her life.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
You know, because at first she wants to still live this bohemian life.
Mm-hmm.
And she sent, because the attorney for the family keeps a watchful eye on her.
Right.
To make sure, because the lawyer is told she is a kook.
Yeah, right.
And she's going to do these things with the boy that are going to be crazy.
Yeah.
As her brother viewed it as nuts and a loose life. Because, that original school she sends him to, they're learning mating of each other and animals. And I mean, the whole story behind how they're learning of the mating is hilarious. And the lawyer's like, what?
Yeah.
And she's like, what? Don't you understand? This is teaching him about life. And really how modern that is, and no subject is closed off.
No subject is taboo. And the other thing that I love about it, I think it starts in the 20s when Patrick shows up, and he's maybe 8 or 10.
Yeah, 10 or something like that.
And then when the depression happens, the crash happens, her servants help her out. I mean, she's lost almost all of her money, and I think she owned her apartment. So fortunately, they have a place to live. She tries one job after another job, and she just can't do them. She's not good at them, and
she never had to work.
and it's this wonderful Christmas gift that they give her is they go and they pay off all of her bills with the money that they have saved.
Right.
And I love it when she looks at them and she says, do you know how dear you are to me? And supposedly they're her servants.
But really, they're family.
Yeah. And then her taking in her secretary, who's supposedly an unmarried pregnant woman.
Of course, the lawyer loses his mind over.
Right. Yes.
What have you done? But that's the thing with her mishaps of her jobs. That's how she meets her future husband.
Yes. Right.
Who is this lovely man.
Yes, he is.
And he never wants her to be any different than what she is.
Exactly. I love that too. Forrest Tucker plays him.
Forrest Tucker is amazing in that.
And he is, for some reason, he didn't lose money in the...
He says something that he never really invested in stocks.
Right.
I think that's how he didn't lose anything, because he didn't have all his money in the stocks.
And they have a plantation and they have money and they have
He's Southern, Yeah. But the adventures that they go on together, he's all in going with her on these adventures.
Yes, which unfortunately one of them is climbing a mountain and he dies. And so then she's wealthy again. But the thing is that is so cool is she always encourages Patrick to be open and accepting of all different kinds of people. So another one of my favorite parts is when he's in college and he thinks he's in love with this woman. Mame has them over for dinner with the lawyer, and she finds out what despicable people they are. And so she tries to break up the relationship. And the funny thing is when she goes to their house, and they live in a white restricted neighborhood, and they're complaining that the house next door, the people are about to rent the house to this Jewish couple. Well, it happens to be that he's like this world famous violinist or something that Mame knows. Well, I guess they're going to buy the property. That's what it is. So Mame buys the property and then she rents it to the Jewish couple.
And because she's so appalled that, and it really shows you how you can let people know that you don't accept these different people without being or sounding like you're really a bigot.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean,
the way they skirt around it with their insinuations and their wink, wink, and nudge, nudge.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And that is one of those, she's just like, these people are appalling.
Oh, yeah. They're horrible.
And then, of course, what she does to show who they are to her nephew.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he is grateful for it in the long run. And of course, I think that's why he wrote the story about his aunt, because she taught him to be a human being and not a human doing.
And loving and caring for all people.
Loving and caring of all people, no matter what.
Yeah.
And that unconditional love.
Right.
That I find so interesting that it seems to be so embedded in our culture and many cultures to be, I'm better than you.
Right.
That whole superiority thing is so repulsive.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think what a lonely existence, because that's what the end of the story, he basically says to her when he has married someone who's wonderful, her nephew.
Yeah, that was her secretary.
Her secretary, and they have their own child. And she's like, "Oh, I'm going to take him everywhere, and we're going to do this, and at first they're like, no, and then they're like, "Oh, yeah, might as well."
Yeah,
because this is the best thing for him.
And remember, school starts on September something. Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, it starts in November, doesn't it?
Yeah, November or something. Yeah. Yes, just talking about it doesn't say enough of what a wonderful story it is.
Oh, no, not at all.
And how amazing she is.
Yes.
So far, all three of these women and the women we're going to continue to talk about, there's really nothing that they've done that I just go, ooh, well, that wasn't very good.
Oh, they're all so good. Yeah.
They are. And it's so interesting because the studio system at the time that these women were making movies was very controlling and very this, and you had a contract with one studio and not the other and all that nonsense.
Right.
However, what happened to these women was a gift because they were given such amazing roles to play.
Well, Bette Davis had to fight for them.
Oh, Bette Davis. Even Katharine Hepburn talked about she shouldn't wear pants in a movie.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
And it was like, I wear pants in my real life, and this is what, I think they had to learn how to have conversations with the studio bosses and how to get these parts and to be able, it's some of them were labeled. Even Ginger Rogers said, I wasn't afraid to be labeled being difficult at times because I wasn't about to lie in my stories. And neither was Bette Davis and either was Rosalind Russell.
Right. So we were going to talk about His Girl Friday, but I think I want to just skip to Katharine Hepburn and Pat and Mike. That's one of the ones where she's wearing slacks.
Yep, she's got slacks on.
Because her quote unquote fiance, who's really horrible for her, says, "You're not going to wear those pants," because they're going off to play golf with some university person that he's trying to get money from. And she goes, "They're slacks. Watch your language."
I love that part. Yep. Well, and that's one of those, a man wanting her to be what he wanted her to be.
Right.
Rather than seeing her beauty in who she is.
Yeah. Now, so Pat and Mike was 1952. Yep. And this is one of Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn's movies together. And she plays a woman athlete. And I think she's the basketball coach.
Back then they called it the activities coordinator.
So somehow, they go to play golf because they're trying to get money for something at Pacific Tech, I think is the name of the college. And the guy who is the manager of the golf course says, "Why don't you let me enter you in a tournament?" And she says, "Oh, no, I've only been playing golf for about a year and I'm not very good at it." And he goes, "I think you're terrific at it." And it's right after they've finished the game.
Because remember, the whole day of playing, her fiance says to her, "Now don't win. You let them win."
Right, exactly.
He's got to win, so he'll want to give us money.
Right. Oh, he's horrible.
So right there is the manipulation of don't be who you really are.
Right. Yeah. Right.
First of all, don't wear slacks and don't win.
So then she does go and get a skirt so that she can, be who he wants her. Yeah. And then when she agrees to be in the tournament and she wins second place or something.
Yeah.
And Spencer Tracy sees her. I love the scene where she goes to New York because she's decided she needs to get away from her fiance. She has his card. And so she shows up at his office and he says, okay, so golf is over now. So you'll have to wait. And she goes, well, aren't there other sports? And he goes,
yes, that's one of my favorites.
Well, yeah. What else?
Well, what else do you do? Oh, I'm good at skeet shooting, or I'm good at basketball. I'm real good at tennis. And, she goes through this whole thing and he's like,
and then he says, what about boxing? And she goes, oh, only featherweight or something.
Right. And he what's the line he says to her? What are you, some kind of mutant or something? He says something hilarious like, who are you? Oh, of course. The next thing they do is start testing her out to see how she plays all these sports. And once again, I'm going to use my new favorite word, gobsmacked.
Yes.
At how talented she is.
Yes.
He's just, and of course, he's her manager, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, he really is. He's also, on the side story, is he's known for betting and doing things he's not supposed to do that are kind of somewhat shady and illegal. He's never really had anyone he truly believes in like her.
Right.
Because, of course, he's also a manager of Aldo Ray is so great in this movie. He's the boxer that he promotes. Aldo Ray is so great because through a process of all these things, he sees how fantastic she keeps doing things. Pat keeps hearing these conversations that Mike has with Aldo Ray's character, the boxer. I own you. I this, I that. Who's going to tell you this? Who's going to tell you you're a winner? Me. And then she starts to talk to Aldo Ray's character like, he doesn't own you.
Yeah.
You are your own. And I love that scene that she says to him. You determine what you are.
Right.
He did not determine that for you. And then, of course, the other thing that's really great is their developing relationship, because how she gets this contrast of how totally relaxed with Spencer Tracy's character, Mike. And then when the boyfriend shows up at this very important tennis match and Spencer Tracy sees he's the curse, he's jinxing her because she gets nervous. She doesn't play well. All sorts of things start to go wrong. And he starts to talk to her about it, and the boyfriend. And of course, she realizes he's right. That other part of the story where he won't play dirty anymore, and these gang guys are wanting to manipulate him. And they're outside the restaurant there where they're going to beat him up. And she comes out and she saves everybody.
I know.
She's the bad guys.
I know. That is so funny.
Oh my God, it's so hilarious. And it's not even a thing that she thinks she should be ashamed of.
Right.
It is so who she is. It's her nature. So, when they're talking to the police about it and all the things that she did to beat the guys up to save everybody. And she's like, yes, I also know self-defense.
I love that Garson Kanan and his wife, Ruth, I think her name is, wrote this specifically for her because she could do all those sports.
She can swim. She can play basketball. Mm-hmm, she can skeet shoot. I mean, she could do everything. And one of the things that they say when they talk about the movie is, she and Spencer Tracy were in this relationship in real life. And that's part of what made her so appealing to him is because she could go fishing with him. She could go do all those things that he loved to do, which it's so natural knowing that this is who Katharine Hepburn was.
Yeah.
That it would be difficult to see her play a little, flower in the corner. She couldn't play a part like that.
No, never. So that one, and then Woman of the Year is the other one that we were going to talk about right. Katharine Hepburn. And I have only seen this all the way through once, but the thing that I loved was at the end, she's this high power political woman. Well, she's also a journalist, and he's a journalist, a sports writer, and
worldwide.
Yeah, she
travels the world speaking about women's issues and right issues. She's very, very famous.
And when they get married, they fall in love and get married. she is trying to do it all. And I love when she has this conversation with her mother, who is also a feminist, who talks about women's issues and stuff. And she has decided to get married. And Katharine Hepburn is like, why?
It's her aunt.
Oh, I thought it was her mother.
Her mother has died, and the aunt's preparing to marry Katharine Hepburn.
Oh, okay. I forgot that. So, but she doesn't understand why she would want to get married at such an advanced age or whatever. And she's, she's maybe in her 40s, late 40s or early 50s.
I think something like that.
And she says, it's great to be able to fight for these causes, but you need to have somebody to share them with.
Right.
So then Katharine Hepburn tries. The scene that is so funny is at the end when she's trying to fix breakfast. She doesn't know how to cook. It's a total disaster because she wants him back.
Well, yeah, because she didn't make a commitment to the marriage.
Right.
She's still living her life as if he and this adoptive child, she completely ignores the child and him.
And then he comes back home and finds her just in a total tizzy, and she's so upset because she can't be a good wife to him. And he says, I don't expect you to do everything. I just want you to commit to our relationship.
Right.
Again, he sees her for who she is, and he doesn't expect her to try to be something else.
Exactly.
Except that he does want a complete commitment if they're going to be married.
He wants a marriage. He doesn't want it in name only. And of course, through that process of her aunt and father getting married, witnessing their ceremony and what the words that her aunt said to her, a companion, a partner, someone to come home to that wants to hear your stories, that wants to share your life.
So this Woman of the Year is a whole 10 years before Pat and Mike, 1942. Right. And it's interesting that they're both women are high-powered kind of women, but in Pat and Mike, she just expects that all women can do what they want to do.
Right.
She just happens to be a sports kind of a woman.
Right.
But she's not expecting anybody else to be that way. I can't remember if Katharine Hepburn's character in Woman of the Year, what her stance is on that.
Well, her whole stance is because her aunt basically raised her. This is the only world she knows.
Oh, right.
She didn't understand because she never saw parents being together.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's my perspective. It's unsaid.
Yeah.
So she just saw this woman being independent, not needing a man, not needing anyone telling her what to do. None of that. Because even the people that work for her, the gentleman that is her assistant is totally rude to Spencer Tracy. Like, okay, yeah, you married her, so what? Nothing's going to change. And he treats him with absolute disrespect. It's unbelievable.
Oh,
how
dear.
he behaves. Like, she's way more important than you are, and that's something that I imagine she would have to change because he needs to get a new attitude about that. But he's not used to her being other than that as well.
Right, exactly.
It's that whole conditioning thing.
Yeah.
So she learns and evolves. Oh, I am wanting to be in love with this man and have my life with him. And my life is going to change, but it doesn't mean it has to suck.
Right. It doesn't have to be horrible.
We're going to live through this life together.
Right.
Because I like how, when he takes her to the ball game. In this one, she doesn't know anything about sports.
Right. Yeah, right.
And she's like, well, okay, so tell me the whole gist of the game. I don't even understand baseball. Can you explain it to me? Because they're at the game. But then she learns that she wants that relationship with him more than she wants to be just a women's rights activist. And that you can have both.
Yeah.
Her aunt teaches her that. You can be married and still have this.
Right. Yes.
Because your spouse couldn't be your spouse if he wouldn't blend with that. And which makes all of these stories we're talking about, these men are that, except for the letter, of course. Now, our next movies,
Random Harvest.
Random Harvest. Oh my God, I love
1942, Greer Garson, now Ronald Colman. And this one takes place during World War I. Ronald Colman's character has had some sort of injury where he's lost his memory.
Right.
And he's in an institution, well, they call it an asylum, someplace in the Midlands of England. And Greer Garson is a stage performer.
Yes.
And her troupe is at that town. Well, it happens that it's the night of the armistice. And so the war is over and everybody's celebrating, and somehow Ronald Colman's character escapes the asylum, and she comes across him. She figures out that he needs help and she helps him.
Right.
And then they fall. There's a whole bunch more to this, but they fall in love, and she has to escape with him, and they eventually get married. Well, something happens and he regains his memory before.
Well, he's become a writer, and he's heading off to newspaper or something has offered him a job
in Liverpool.
And so then he gets hit by a car and gets his memory back.
And he gets the memory back, but it's all before he met her.
Yes.
And he doesn't remember that he has a son. He doesn't remember her. And so the most important part of the movie is what she does to try to get close to him again, to try to reignite his memory of her. Right. And she learns to become a secretary and
has entered his life.
Yeah, re-enters his life.
And the reserve that she shows to and then the pain when she's not with him. Mm-hmm. And, she has communicated with the doctor that was treating him in the asylum. Mm-hmm. She's so amazing in this part because she knows she may never get him back.
Yeah, he may never remember her. And then when he's going to get married,
right?
She is so the reserve that she shows,
my God, I know,
and the support she shows of him. It's just amazing.
Right, it is amazing.
So that makes the ending so satisfying.
Right.
Because eventually he realizes, he's not in love with this young woman that he's going to get married to. And so he makes this contractual agreement to marry her so that she can help him with his political career because he wants to enter parliament.
Right.
And eventually he realizes he's in love with her. And then at the end, it's so satisfying. Spoiler alert, he remembers her.
Yeah. Well, and it's through an interesting series of events because, he's preparing to marry this very much younger girl.
Yes.
And they're doing the whole wedding planning thing. But he starts to have a memory of something as they're playing and picking out the music for the wedding. And the young girl is so wise. She just starts to cry and she goes, I know we can't be together. You have that far away look, like you remember something, but you can't quite grasp what it is.
You're in love with someone, but it's not me.
Right. And it's not me. I think I'm close, but I'm not her, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So then, because of his business that he has helped save the family business through his financial prowess, and then, of course, the decision just to, I'm in Parliament. I probably should be married. It's all practical. He thinks he's being practical.
Right.
And of course, because she loves him so much, she, of course, agrees to it. And it's just a marriage of convenience.
That part's heartbreaking to her.
It's heartbreaking for her. And then it takes the whole, I think, how many years they were married. And she's like, she just don't know if she can do it anymore. So she's like, I'm going to go away for a while. And then he gets sent back to the very town where the asylum is, and that's where he starts to get his memory.
Yeah.
Where they lived,
where they met.
It couldn't have been anybody but Greer Garson because her depth of emotion that she has in this movie is gut-wrenchingly beautiful.
Yes. Well, and I was just watching the first part of the next movie of hers, The Valley of Decision, 1945. With Gregory Peck. And both of those movies are in black and white.
Yeah.
But I have seen her in other movies that are in black and white, and she blushes. You can tell she's blushing at certain points.
Yes.
And
kind of a bummer. She only had one or two movies that she was filmed in color because she had the most hair. Her coloring. And that's what I love. One of my favorite scenes in Random Harvest when he's asking her to marry him for this business reason.
Mm-hmm.
But he looks at her and he just gets real quiet. And she goes, Charles, you're looking at me in such a funny way. And he's like, the sun, the way it's hitting your hair, you're quite beautiful.
Yeah.
She's
right.
like, oh. Okay, so Valley and Decision and Random Harvest, I have to say, are probably the ones I've seen the most of hers. Every single movie we've talked about here is the same way with Random Harvest and Valley of Decision. They're like comfort food for me.
Right.
The women's voices.
Yes.
The stories.
Yeah.
I know them so well that they resonate and they're in my soul.
Yes. Well, and the thing that I love about Valley of Decision, it's sort of an upstairs, downstairs, like Downton Abbey sort of thing, where she's this Irish maid. Right. And I think she goes to work for the Scott family. It takes place in Pittsburgh. I think he said 1873 at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. And it's his family owns a steel mill. Well, her father worked at the Scott steel mill and was injured and is now in a wheelchair. And he just has been filled with more and more and more hate toward the Scotts. It's like you mentioned their name and he just calls them devils. It's an irrational, played by Lionel Barrymore in such a great, he is so great. So she's just come out of school. She goes to work as a maid in the Scott house. Right. And she realizes that family is not at all what her
they're
father.
Not ogres. They're not hateful people. They're not manipulative.
It's a loving family. Yeah. Right. And in fact, as the movie goes along, and the book is like this too, she becomes a member of the family and they love her back. Right. And she falls in love with Gregory Peck's character, Paul, who is...
She tries not to because she knows how much her father hates him.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but she sees herself as a servant of the house. And there's this supposedly strict line. He's, wealthy and she's the servant. They don't have that attitude. In fact, there's this one point where another god of industry or whatever you want to call him, and he's trying to get William Scott Sr. to join with this conglomeration with Carnegie, I think it is. And William Scott says, no, I am a big fish in a small pond and I like it that way.
Well, and he kind of even mentions, I came here with very little money in my pocket.
Oh, right.
They didn't come rich. They built their wealth. And that's something her father doesn't care to recognize.
Well, somebody points it out to him, but he gets really upset about that.
In love with her.
Yeah.
He said, you do realize they had to work hard for where they got to too. He just thrives on his hate.
Mm-hmm. Even though the Scots are still paying his salary. Well, and so it's sort of this tragic story where she goes away when the daughter, his sister, marries an earl. She goes to England to get away from him, but he's never fallen out of love with her. Right. And so when the father says, why don't you marry the girl across the street? And he says, I'm in love with somebody else. And William's like, what? And finally the mother tells him he's in love with Mary. And so he writes to Mary and tells her to come back right away. Well, then this tragedy happens that her father perpetrates and both fathers die. So that keeps them apart. But see, the thing that I love about the movie and the book is she and he, well, it doesn't show it in the movie, but in the book, his wife dies. And in the book, they have 3 sons. In the movie, they only have 1 son. He and Louise have married, but he's never loved her.
Well, and I'm not sure she's really loved him either.
Oh, no. She just wants the status.
She wants the status. She wants the money.
Right.
She's like one of those wives, well, your father died and left you, da-da-da-da. And this is, you still get your hands dirty. You make my son get his hands dirty,
Well, and there's a lot more explanation about what happened to her and why she's connected to the Scott family and all that. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like this obligation in a way. And so when she dies in the book, he hires Mary to be his housekeeper. And essentially they're married in that she raises his sons. She takes care of his house and manages it. He comes home from the mill and they talk about what's happening at the mill and plans for the mill. I mean, every single thing that a married
her advice like he had prior.
Right. And so in the movie, it ends right when he's breaking it off with Louise.
Right.
But you can tell that that's what's going to happen, that they are going to continue on together, he and Mary. And so it's this unconventional relationship.
It really is. You know, Mary starts her own business.
Right. Right. With her sister.
Which is unusual for women to do something up. And the mother helped fund that.
Yeah.
It's really great though, because you know, Mary in so many situations is not afraid to speak her mind. When she goes to England with the daughter and she's not afraid to tell her, you know, you're cold-hearted.
Which she is.
Although I do believe she loves her husband and her husband loves her. But she's just very not really attached and understanding of where she really came from. She's so used to the wealth.
Right.
But then she comes to realize that she has more than that.
Right.
Okay, so we've been talking for a while. Should we move on to Stella Dallas?
Yeah, or My Reputation with both of those are with Barbara Stanwyck. Yes. My Reputation is not a very well-known movie. It was made in 1946. It actually takes place during World War II, but it was released in 1946. So it might have been made during the war because George Brent's character is going off to be in the war. Barbara Stanwyck's character got married when she was 17 years old. And when the movie starts, her husband has just died. And she has two sons who are like 11, 12, 13 years old. And they live outside of Chicago. And then she's part of this rich set of friends. But it's hard for her because, you know, she's been so wrapped up in her husband's life and his illness. She's been his nurse the whole time he was ill. And so, and she has, again, we have another controlling mother who is a widow herself. And so her mother's trying to get her to be a widow for the rest of her life. Yep. And when Barbara Stanwyck goes, she can't deal with her mom anymore. Her best friend, played by Eve Arden, is that her name?
Yep.
She's so great. And they take her off to a ski trip.
Yes.
Someplace in the West. And that's how she meets George Brent, who's a military officer. Another meet cute thing. Yep.
A totally underrated actor.
Oh my gosh, I love George Brent. So she falls in love with him and it's totally against her. He is not the kind of person that her set is going to accept.
Right.
Her mother doesn't accept him. I mean, it's just this whole... So the movie, My Reputation, is all about her burning her old life reputation. Right. And of course, in the end, though, the thing that I love about it is that her mother eventually really does help her because he gets called up and she wants to go with him to New York on the train to be with him until he leaves. And her sons get all upset and they go to their grandmother. Now, they've never been close to their grandmother. So the fact that they go to their grandmother to talk about how upset they are about their mom's relationship with this major, she goes and talks to her mother and her mother says, you know, if you don't handle this part right now, this conversation with your sons, well, you'll never, ever be able to repair the relationship, which is actually true.
It is true.
But because they think she's forgotten all about their dad.
Right.
And that whole scene where she's talking to them about how you can love more than one person.
Right.
I love your father, but he's dead now.
Right.
And
life has to move forward.
Right. Yeah. And so she ends up not going to New York with him, but he says, I know I'm coming back. Right. And there will be a chance for the boys to get to know him and to like him.
I think she ends up not going because it's like she's waited too long to say yes.
No, she ends up not going because she's got to take care of her sons. That's why she doesn't go. Because I watched it not too long ago. And so
I just know that once again, we're talking about a woman who has to make at that time period a very hard decision.
Yes.
You know,
right.
Yes, I can love my boys and give them a life, but I need a life too.
Right.
And I deserve to have love.
And that's what she tries to explain to them. And they sort of, the oldest one, I think, starts to sort of get it.
Right.
But she doesn't go. She doesn't go to New York with him. But the thing I love about it is she confronts her quote unquote old friends about how they've spread all these horrible rumors about her.
Yes. That's such a great part too.
And she, she's like, I don't need you guys.
Nope. And you're not really my friends. She tells them who they are and they're like, what?
Yeah. Shallow, horrible people.
Right.
Yeah. Now, Stella Dallas is a 1937 movie, and she is so great in that one because she falls in love with an upper class guy. She's this middle class woman, or maybe even lower class woman.
Lower class, I think.
She's not very polished, let's say it that way. But I think she really loves her husband, but she just doesn't want to live the kind of life that he wants her to live, maybe. And so eventually, in the end, they stay married for quite a while, but eventually he finds someone that he's in love with and asks her for a divorce, and he wants to take their daughter. And so she has this great conversation with his fiance.
Right.
And she realizes, I need to let my daughter go. I need to let her be happy. I need to let her have the opportunities that he and his new wife can give her. That's this huge sacrifice.
It's a huge story because women weren't supposed to do that.
Well, and not only that, but it's like his set could not accept her the way she was.
Truth. Right.
And she had to accept that.
But she also, it's not like she's giving her daughter up to a man who's unloving and too pish posh. He does love his daughter.
Yes. And he's a good man.
He doesn't want to own her.
Right.
It's so well written. It shows the struggle, how real that is for her to go, now, wait a minute. Do I want to keep her just to keep her?
Right.
Or am I, what is love? What is the definition of love?
Right. And what is best for her?
Right. And my definition of love is to know to give her the best that I can, that I know as a single mom, I wouldn't be able to do for her.
She does live with her daughters. Because her husband they don't live together for a number of years.
For quite a while. Right.
Yeah. And the daughter is sometimes she absolutely loves her mom, but sometimes she's a little bit embarrassed that her mom is not quite so polished, but she never shows her mom that. That's the other cool thing.
That's true. It's really a loving story. Mm-hmm. Although to some people they would go, oh, it's so tragic. But when at the very end, that's the ending that's so beautiful. Yes, she's poor and she's sad, but she's looking at her daughter preparing to get married. Mm-hmm. And she sees and is at peace with making what she feels was the right choice.
Yes.
And that's the thing that, once again, it's a monumentally, all these stories we're talking about, people think, oh, old movies, they're not very relevant. Yes, they are.
Yes.
They are still extremely relevant. Knowing that love comes first is so important. Mm-hmm. And that in the end, the love is what matters.
Yes, exactly. And that's the way almost all these movies that we've talked about are. It's all about the love.
Right. Like our next one, they're both comedies, but My Favorite Wife and Theodore Goes Wild.
Yes.
That's what, My Favorite Wife, what makes Irene Dunn's character so amazing is, yes, she's been gone for 5 years, mm-hmm. but she took a trip that normally women at that time period would not leave their family to go do. She had a job.
Yeah, My Favorite Wife is 1940 and Theodore Goes Wild is 1936. And she has jobs in both of them.
Unexpected in Theodore Goes Wild. But, my favorite wife is, she goes off on this ship to do these studies. The ship is wrecked. They think she's dead. The movie starts off where Cary Grant, he's he wants to marry someone else because, he's raised his children alone for 5 years.
No, 7 years.
7 years. That's right. Because 7 years you can declare someone dead.
Right.
And, so the courts declare her dead and then he gets married. He gets remarried. Well, what happens? She shows up again. They get found on this remote island and she comes back home and it's this journey of her getting her man back. I mean, and she's not afraid to do it. What I love about it.
It's all these funny situations.
Oh, it's hilarious. Well, and it's really interesting because this is one thing that's really great about Cary Grant. He's not afraid to play these flawed characters.
Right. Yeah.
And he can't tell the new wife that his first wife is still alive.
I love that. I love when Irene Dunn challenges him about that. How come you can't just say, my wife's come back?
Right. Just say, my wife's come back. I know. And he's just hemming and hawing and hemming and hawing and hemming and hawing, and then the challenge that she puts out by, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm this other woman. I'm like, sister, because she's not about to give up.
Yes.
And of course, her mother-in-law tells her, she is a horrible woman, and then how she, without telling her children that she's their mother, she endears herself to her children.
Yes. Right.
Just by being around and not leaving. And it's a highly recommended movie because it doesn't appear to be, it's just, this flight of fancy. No, it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And Irene Dunn in both of these movies takes these funny parts, but there's a seriousness to it.
Yes.
She is intelligent, forthright.
Yes.
She knows clearly what she wants. And she's not about to give that up.
Yeah. And I love Theodora Goes Wild because she lives in this straight-laced New England town and she's written this racy novel under another name. And it starts off when they're reading the novel out loud and everyone's, oh my gosh. And you can see the look on her face. And then you find out she's the author and she's talking to her publisher. I had no idea it was racy. I just thought it was romantic.
Like a romantic story. Right. To her, it was romantic. But, it's that contrast of these ultra conservative women.
Oh, yeah.
And they see as racy, which, like she said, and her publisher is even like, yeah, it's just telling a romantic story. And the hoops and all the things that she goes through to think she needs to hide her identity. But then the realization she comes through a series of comedic events.
With Melvin Douglas. Who,
another guy I love. So he helps her see, why do you have to hide who you are?
Exactly. Which is so ironic because he's hiding who he is.
I know, it is hilarious because she kind of points that out to him too.
Yeah. Right.
But, it's a great woman power story because that moment that she tells who she is with such confidence and quite frankly, she honors herself in that moment of going, I'm not going to hide who I am anymore from any of you. And this gossip and all of this nonsense that you say, none of it's true.
Well, I love her aunts and her uncle. The aunts who raised her, and they, in the end, they support her 100%, even though they think that, oh my gosh, what are we going to...
What's going to happen to us?
Right, exactly. But her uncle is completely unconventional, never been married, has had all these lovers, and he's... Right. And I love it when he says, has anyone ever called you baby? And then Melvin Douglas ends up calling her baby. It's so funny.
It's a great movie.
It is.
It's another one of those stories that Irene Dunn was just genius at, where she's this independent, strong, intelligent woman who can show it in a way without it being all serious, And I think that's the beauty of our classic films that we love. And I feel like we're starting to come back into that again, that we don't have to make strong women bitches.
Right.
I think there was kind of a period time of movies where I'm a tough chick,
Right.
And they weren't real nice, or they didn't do nice things to prove their strength.
Right.
But when you look at some of our rom-coms now, it's like we've kind of returned to this greatness of this.
Yeah, where they're women and they can be moms and they can be sexy and they can be business women and they can, or whatever they happen to choose. They don't have to fit into a mold. And
their men and or significant other now loves them where they're at.
Right.
And that's the part of them that they love. And that's what was so great about these classic films that we've talked about, and then some, where these men love them and they wouldn't want them to be any other way. And that makes for strong male characters too.
Right,
because,
exactly.
Men were supposed to expect the housewife, the white picket fence and coming home to the little lady.
Yeah, but like in White Christmas, Bing Crosby says it's lonely to be up there on that white charger and to be the knight in shining armor. And in all of these movies, the men and women have real partnerships.
Yes, they do. And I couldn't love them if they were different.
I know.
I wouldn't be able to love them for that.
Right.
And these women that play them.
Yes.
And it takes a great deal of talent to be able to do what they did. And Bette Davis did not care one iota. And I don't think any of these women cared, but Bette Davis laid the groundwork for so many of them.
Bette Davis didn't care if she played unlikable characters?
Well, and I don't think Bette Davis cared if she argued with directors or writers.
Right.
And was thought of as a bitch.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
She was like, oh, well, she did not let anyone else define her but her.
Right.
And every single one of these actresses were like that. And if we could name so many more.
Well, we probably will in another episode, but I think what you just said is a really great place to end this.
Yeah.
And we encourage you to go watch the movies of the actresses that we have talked about, because as Eli Wallach said in The Holiday, these women had gumption and, we want to have gumption.
Right.
We modern women.
And we deserve to have gumption.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Because that makes us an active part of our world, our society, our life. This was so much fun.
Oh, good. Yes.
And if you ever want to continue with other actresses, I'm obviously.
Well, I'm sure we will at some point. Sometimes it's hard to get guests. And when I always have you to fall back on, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that.
I'm pretty grateful for it too. Well, and I would like to end by saying I am really grateful that I have raised a daughter who loves classic films as well.
Yes.
You've talked with me and her on her own. She never ceases to amaze me with her observation of not only the movies and the stories that we choose to share, but of life. And I feel very confident that she will go out in the world and be an amazing woman.
Well, her mom's amazing. So,
Well, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for being on the show again.
Oh, you're welcome. I absolutely love doing this.
Yeah, we'll talk again.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage Woman Chronicles, at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.